lecture? Oh, we still have time. Good. The next question, after our voice of conscience and how to listen to our voice of conscience and how to experience that voice of conscience within us. The next question is, how reliable is our conscience? And I put that in the lecture, this question, because even many theosophists say our conscience is not absolutely all-knowing and all-wise. And by constantly repeating that, there starts a little underground feeling of, if it is not all wise, why would I consult it? Because it is not perfect. Yes, I cannot trust it for 100%. And that is, in fact, not true. Your conscience is unfolded already for 18 million years and grows every time. Every time you die, you have that overview of your life and you pick out of that overview all those spiritual lessons and you build that in your character. That is the way your conscience grows. And in fact, by consulting, by searching your conscience, by listening to your conscience, by choosing in the line of what your conscience tells you, if you do that, that is the way to develop, in fact, your intuition contact with your inner Buddha. So, without using your conscience, you cannot expect so many intuitions. It is not the same, but by doing one thing, you make it easier for your inner Buddha to reach out to you in the form of intuition. And I hope that I have made clear tonight that your conscience is not perfect, but it is the best you have. And by using it every second of your life, you will in fact grow into those realms of inner planet, inner solar system and inner galactic system, and you grow to a higher level of consciousness. So, how reliable is my conscience? Your conscience is as reliable as you have made it in former incarnations. And that's the best you have, for that is what you are. And use what you are. So, the second factor is that your ability to listen to your conscience is sometimes, and that is, no, I have to start all over again. The reliability of your conscience is only partly because your conscience is not totally cosmically evolved, what I just explained to you. But there is another reason. It can be that your conscience is very well evolved already, but that you cannot use it. And when you try to use it, the signals are not very clear. And one of the factors is that your ability to listen to your conscience is not yet fully awakened, not yet developed enough in this incarnation. And we have a large study and all material about education. And within that material, you find the phases of development of a child. And you know, of course, you have the baby, you have the toddler, you have the school child, you have the teenager, and then you have adulthood. And only when a human being has grown through 21 or 25 or 18 years or whatever, every human being is different, but when a human being reaches that age, then you can say that the level of ability to listen to your conscience is developed as far as you left life in a former incarnation. In fact, you need 21 years to develop that ability to listen to your conscience. And that is the reason why a young child you have to educate, to listen to its conscience, but a young child is not yet so good. So, how must I say that? So trained in it already, yes, but in the teenage time, in the puberty time, you see that as parents or as family members, you see teenagers wrestling with the influence of their conscience coming through in their lives, and they are not strong enough yet to handle that. And that is one of the main reasons of their imbalance in their teenage times. Yes, and the more they grow into adults, the more they are able to listen to their voice, to their conscience, to hear that voice and to act in that line. Yes, it is like having teeth as a baby. Yes, when they just come through, it is much crying and drooling and so on. And at that time, the teeth do not function so well. And the same thing happens with conscience during puberty. Yes, and if you know that as a parent, then you can help them. Then you can stimulate them to use their conscience. What is right? What is wrong at this moment with this question? And they can talk to you and you can support them in that. Okay, there is a third factor. You are an adult now, you are at a level of using your conscience as you left your former incarnation, and then you look around and you start using your influence of your conscience. And then there are some factors by which you are handicapped in doing that. And I have here 5 handicaps. And the moment you know them, you see them, then you can overcome them. And you can help others to overcome them as well. Let us start. Your ability to listen to your conscience is disturbed, first of all, by inexperience to go inward. That during those 21 years, your parents never ever stimulated you to use your conscience, to go inward, to follow your conscience. If no one in your family, even your parents, have helped you in that and are themselves people who struggle to find their own conscience, that is always possible, then it is like a family where the parents never read stories before going to bed. Yes, by reading stories to your children, you teach them how to talk and read, how to talk to others. Starts there. And if no one taught you to go inward and use your conscience, then you are, how do you say that in schools? You are ripe for the remedial teacher. Yes, you need help then from others. And that is what we try to do in our organization to balance, in fact, to harmonize those things that parents could not or would not do when you were young. We help each other. And then there's a second handicap in ability to hear your conscience. And that is the fact that the ability to listen to your conscience is paralyzed. Not disturbed by inexperience, no, paralyzed. And that is a little bit more difficult to explain, but I use one example. And the example is PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and especially the PTSD as a result of war, of veterans having that disease. For you also can have PTSD on other reasons, but especially when a young person, they are always young, 18, 20, 24, they are sent to battlefields, to horrible situations. And what happens with them when they are back? That they are handicapped because during those years in those horrible situations, they had to do things they never would have done when they were not a soldier, when they lived at home led by their conscience. They have to do by the head of an army, their sergeants, whatever, they have to do things, they have to kill people, they have to do terrible things, and their conscience is out of balance with their actions. And at that moment, the conscience, the inner man, the reincarnating man, which you in fact are, is going back inward. So that spiritual umbilical cord, which is our lifeline, our stream of consciousness with those higher selves, that umbilical cord is narrowing. And at that moment, when those young soldiers come back home, they are totally out of balance and make decisions they never would have made before they went to battlefields. And this is a very tragic situation. And we talked about pioneers, the middle class, and the human beings in the human kingdom lagging behind. And what you see is that the real spiritual people, spiritual human beings, are often not affected by PTSD. Why not? because they already developed in their daily life the moral strength, the spiritual strength to keep to maintain their balance in those horrible situations. So they did not divide their normal waking consciousness with their conscience. Conscience following people going into battle, these are the ones who suffer from PTSD because they know how to find their conscience but are not strong enough to cling to that while they have to do the most horrible things. And in fact, PTSD patients are most of the time more conscientious than people who just live instinctively, never consulting their conscience. When they go at war, they are not so struck by PTSD because they do not have the feeling they miss something. It is difficult to explain what I try to tell you in a different language, but I hope you understand me. What means healing PTSD? PTSD healing, the real healing, so not the medication and not the paralyzing of the thinker in distress, but the real healing means that you have to help them actively to restore their connection with their conscience, to make that umbilical cord again a channel through which that influence can flow. And there are techniques in Zen Buddhism, but there is also a writer, Edward Tick, and he developed a kind of healing method that has been used by the American government to help those poor young people that have been sent into war. And at the moment, in Europe, there are again people who do not have the decency, the karmic decency, to understand that the moment they decide that there must be war something, that they are in fact not only instrumental, that people lose their lives, but also that young souls will be damaged in the soul level. And that is the reason why in the Theosophical Society, which is a non-political organization, always non-political, but we take care of the mentality of mankind. And when the mentality, because of weak politicians and diplomats, makes the army of a country too strong, and it is always the people leading armies that decide, come, let us make war. Let us threaten each other, and up to a certain level, then we have war. Those people have that power because the conscience following people in a society are not awake and strong enough to help the immune system of the planet to, how must I say that, to block the microbes of hate. And I hope that after this lecture about conscience, that you will do the same in your surroundings, in your circles, to make clear what PTSD is and what you do with the human soul by saying, oh, let us make war. Yes, it is really very important that we are aware of that. So, I had inexperience because of education, inexperience in inner listening. I have the ability is paralyzed, and then we have as the third that people do not want to listen to their conscience, and they exist. Yes, people who think it is easier just not to listen, because then the choices are so much more prosperous and so much more nice for the personality. And there you see egoism and heartlessness. And in fact, those are the people Plato and Socrates talk about when they say these are the most lamented ones, because they have the conviction that they did a very shrewd job for themselves, and they are proud of themselves because they do not listen to the fact, they do not listen to the voice of their conscience, who tells them, is this good for the community or only good for you alone? And they do not want to listen to that. And therefore, we never criticize these people. We never criticize people who choose for their personality, although their conscience tells them otherwise. We do not criticize them because we know what a disastrous influence that can have on that umbilical cord. That at a certain moment they lose contact with their inner self. And that is something lamentable. Is that an English word, lamentable? Oh, I use it. But I hope you understand what I mean. That is serious. That is serious to help them to find their way to universal brotherhood again. And that is the reason why week after week after week we try to tell that and throw those ideas in the mental atmosphere of this planet, that people perhaps can take that out and that they think in their life, now I have 3 boats, yachts, now I have 5 whatevers. Isn't that enough? Yes, that insight we have to help them with. Then we have 2 hindrances left, and one is that your receiving station of receiving that voice of your conscience is defect. And of course, people can be born with defects, always possible, but always help them, at least to use a little bit of their conscience. Yes, but you have people that are themselves, sometimes willingly, are destroying their receiving station. And one, or in fact two, ways to do that is to use alcohol or drugs. That is a way by which in this life you hinder that line with your conscience. You can destroy it, and when you stop using alcohol or drugs, then the rest of your life you have to fight to build that up again. And that is the reason why we say, know what you are starting when you just try out alcohol and try out drugs, because you lose your connection with your higher self. Not in 5 minutes, but if you make a habit of using it, then it goes slowly less and less. Okay, alcohol and drugs that was. And now there is a very important one, that is hindrance 5, and that is not hindrance from within, egoism, not hindrance because you yourself destroy your receiving station. No, that is when you are influenced from outside. And that happens. Not next week, but the study after that, I can show you a text where one of the teachers of Helena Blavatsky explained that so well, how that happens. And I give you 2 examples. First of all, psychologizations. Oh God, what a word. What I mean is that other stronger thinkers overwhelm your free will to think. And it happens. It happens all the time. And it happens because you open yourself for that influence. And it happens in politics. It happens on internet. The whole idea of fake news. And I give you an example of politicians. There are politicians, and I don't give you names, you can, you know them yourself as well, who have the habit of talking for hours for thousands of the people in their country. And those people listen as a group to one speaker who has a tone, who has movements of their arms, who have eyes looking at you that are actively paralyzing your free will. It happens. And we must not do as if it doesn't exist. What is your remedy? What is your immune system against those influences? That is your active thinking. That is not letting yourself go on the waves of those words that are said. No, active thinking. And I give you an example. We go everywhere where we are invited in conferences. And those are theosophical conferences, philosophical, whatever conferences, we are invited. And then we go, and sometimes people have classes, and then you are in rows, and we had so many times that people say, oh, now we all stand up and we all listen to this and we do that. And at a certain time, some speaker asked us to take our chair and do this with our chair. The most silly things we were asked to do. You know what happened? At that moment, that person asking you to do silly things, yes, doing your arm like this, yes, or bouncing your chair, is active in psychologizing you. And at that moment, our group was standing listening politely, but no one moved his chair. And the one before the group was totally unbalanced by that, because a few people refused to do that. And that is a way by which you can prevent to become a slave of other one's will. Because when someone does that with you, and you let yourself be paralyzed, at that moment that person can ask you to do the most horrible, unconscious-like things. And that last one, influenced from outside, is something what we teach in our course, Thinking Differently, to be alert on that and be protected by yourself. Let your heart be the protection of people doing that. And I talked already about a football stadium, and that is also a way of paralyzing your own free will. Yes, being part of a group. And when I hear that a group of young people damaged an outsider as a group, then they do things, then they don't listen to their own conscience. What they never would have done, would they be alone. And you know yourself many examples of that. Let us recapitulate. You have 5 hindrances of making contact with your conscience. The inexperience in doing that because your education never gave it to you. The paralyzing of your ability to listen by things as war and killing and things like that. Then not wanting to listen because your egoism and your personal impulses are too strong, self-willed. Then the 4th, your receiving station is a defect by using substances. And 5, the ability to listen is paralyzed by influence outside of yourself, like people talking to you with the idea of paralyzing your will, and being part of a group and reacting as a group instead of thinking for yourself. And friends, it is horrible again. It is the suffering of a lecturer that I could not tell you everything I wanted to tell you tonight. I hope to do that in the next lecture in 2 weeks. And what I have told you now, it is a lot, I know it. Try to rework it within yourself. Try to think, is that true or not? Let us see. Yes, what is conscience and what is good and evil? What is the voice of conscience? How does listening to the voice of your conscience work? How reliable is your conscience? And the last part, can you train your conscience? And can you have help with doing that? We do in 2 weeks. And to prepare yourself for our study next week, I give you check questions by which you can check if I am lying or not. Yes? The first one, are you indeed universal? Do you recognize in yourself universal thoughts and habits which transcend our everyday functioning as human beings? And the second one, can you decide for yourself what you will listen to? Do you sometimes succeed in silencing the voice of the personality? And do you recognize in yourselves the ways in which the influence of your conscience reaches you? And the third question, do you manage to recognize conscience following people? Important if you want to find a teacher to help you to find your own voice of your conscience. This is what I could give you tonight, and there are 4 beautiful texts on the website. Tonight Lalibel will put it on our website as a reading basis for next week. And if you don't have time next week, okay, you have at least reading material that is so precious. I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. So now we have to wait so that everyone can make 3 breaths, and after that we answer the rest of your questions. Yes, we stop now? Friends, your questions. We have one question?
Yes, we have one question, what was asked earlier already. If we come from the One, and in a certain way are the divine, why do we have to go through all the trouble to become divine again?
Okay, that's a good question. We are divine, but we do not yet express it totally. We are only expressing a little bit of our thinking faculties. For we have, I think, 2 billion years to go to become perfect human beings. That beings who have their thinking faculty perfected. I talked about our inner God with a range of consciousness as large as the inner levels and spheres of our galaxy. And you can say that our inner God is a kind of galaxy developing entity, which we are. We are in its sphere of influence. You see that egg. But we are not yet expressing that. And you can look at an atom, a cell in our body. Is that cell us? Yes. In the heart of the heart of the heart of that cell is as far as we are as growing human beings. And we are in the heart of the heart of the heart of us, our inner God. The whole universe, the whole cosmos, is growing and growing and growing. And at a certain time, we have reached the level of sun. We have become a sun, shining, in fact, for a whole solar system. And when we have reached that, then the cells of our body, our life atoms, you can say, have grown into being human beings. And our inner God has been growing into a super galactic consciousness. So everything grows and everything takes everything with it. And that is the way the cosmos works. There is always movement, there is always growth, and there is always interaction and helping and supporting each other. So we are inner God in the heart of us, but we are not yet at that active level. So it is not only all that trouble. For growing is no trouble. Growing is a form of joy. And you know that, you have that same experience when you have done something where you worked so hard for, and it works, then you don't see that as a trouble, you see it as a joy. Look, it works. I have found within myself my conscience for the first time consciously. Yes, I know actively my relation to my conscience. You may have much trouble to reach that state, but the moment you reach it, there is no trouble at all. You reach something super. And that is, in fact, what evolution is. Next, oh, this is not next series. No, I must not. That's the Dutch series. There we talk about evolution, but not in the English series. It is an answer I can give you, but there is 1,000 things more to say about it. You understand that. I always have the feeling that answers are by definition poor. I hope it is for you enough to think about. So it is not trouble to develop something in yourself. It is, in fact, a wonderful thing that such a thing can happen. I give you one example. In our neighborhood, someone died. It can happen, of course. And looking from the standpoint of reincarnation, then you say, okay, next time we meet again and develop further together. But the, how do you say that? What is the letter you receive when someone dies? How do you call that in English? Yes, with the black lines. Okay, I don't know the name. Next time I can tell you. There was a poem in it. And the poem says, if this is the end, and there's nothing more, then the only thing that is left is sorrow, tears, and suffering, and so on. That was a poem made by the partner of the one who passed away. And then you see the utter lack of hope and view on the future when someone thinks he is only a 1 second event in the cosmos. Yes, you live and after that there's nothing. This, what is exchanged today, last week, this proves us how important it is that we teach each other that we are gods in embryo, that we are gods in the heart of ourselves, and that we are eternity entities. Eternity, that we are infinite, eternal, and boundless. So important. The sheer suffering of the partner of that person that left, and it is really the suffering, the tears are so real and so deep that I cannot understand how some philosopher takes away from you the fact that you are a god in embryo. The only thing you have to do is being born as a god, for an embryo works to that point. And the last series of this year, Joop Smits gives 4 lectures and 4 studies about the Egyptian Book of the Dead and the initiations as explained in the Egyptian mysticism. And there you can find the inner information about how we are born as gods. And I hope that we will see you in that series of lectures as well. Are there more questions, Jenny?
No, there are no more questions.
Okay, then I hope to see you next Sunday, and then we do not have YouTube, but we have Zoom. Hooray, then I can see you, and then we can talk more, yes, openly is not a good word, but we can have a conversation. And I only see now a camera and never you, and I miss that. That I really miss with the lectures here in the Blavatskyhouse of 2 years ago. But we see each other at Zoom next week. And we always end with the Gayatri, I must say, from the Rig Veda, where that whole egg diagram I gave you, which you totally are, is described in words. Listen, O thou golden sun of most excellent splendor, illumine our hearts and fill our minds, so that we, recognizing our oneness with the divinity, which is the heart of the universe, may see the pathway before our feet and tread it to those distant goals of perfection, stimulated by thy own radiant light.